My application was finally reviewed, and I was told that I wasn't quite ready to move up to an industrial position just yet, and that I needed at least a few more months of experience before I could get promoted. I was disappointed, but they did authorize a raise, so that was good. What wasn't good was I had to work on a presentation about how we had improved our customer service in the last year. This wouldn't have been such an issue had I got to work on this project by myself, but I got paired up with someone who was completely inept and very difficult to work with. His name was Joseph, and he was a young guy who was new to the workforce. I may have been 22 at this time, but this 18-year-old gave me worries. The guy's attitude was terrible, although to be fair, he was nowhere near as bad as Carl, but that's another story. Joseph was impatient with the slightest thing, and he tended to jump in where he didn't belong. Even Bert couldn't stand the guy, and you know you've got problems when Bert, of all people, gives you the stink eye. Anyway, Joseph and I had today and Tuesday to work on the presentation. Thank goodness the office was closed that Monday, because I was going to need a very long break after dealing with this guy. The day started, and we both met at the conference room. We shook hands nervously, and we began discussing the topic. I say we make our presentation a provocational one and explain how we've streamlined our customer service. Then we show an example where our customer service is better, and we show how we've reduced the number of complaints in that particular example to demonstrate our effectiveness. I said,
I say we make a presentation purely based on motivation, and we explain to the beginners why it's important to strive for excellence. Maybe we could even add some funny sides to the presentation to really grab the viewer's attention.
Joseph said, you do realize we are presenting to corporate, right? I asked.
So,
He asked. You know how they are. They are always very strict with the way things are done. We can't have funny or cute examples. We have to go with more serious ones, I explained.
well, they must have a sad ring life if that's what they're interested in.
He said, that's how every corporation is. They are always very professional and mature about things. And if you are not professional or mature, they won't be taking you seriously. And we need to be taken seriously if we want to keep our jobs, I said.
We'll work the web one. Thank you very much.
He said, Joseph, please, we have to work together. Just think, if we impress them, we'll have the opportunity to move up the ladder. Wouldn't that be great? I asked. Joseph just rolled his eyes, and we continued debating the topic. We just could not agree with each other, and we kept arguing. He wanted to present his own idea for the presentation, while I suggested we take turns with certain parts of the presentation. But no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get Joseph to cooperate. I had these really good topics lined up for the presentation, but Joseph kept arguing that my ideas weren't appeasing enough and claimed that his would please the management better. I read each of his poorly worded and rambling suggestions, and let me tell you, at that point I'd rather trust a monkey with a typewriter than Joseph. It felt like we made no progress during the morning, and I was glad when it was finally lunchtime so I could get away from the guy for an hour.
So, how are you getting along with Joseph?
Harry asked me as we ate. I was really stressed out. Oh, just trying to make a young, impatient Gus see sense and failing horribly. I'm totally not about to lose my mind or explode from stress anytime soon. I said, why did it have to be me teamed up with him? Why couldn't Carl get paired up with him instead?
Be fair, Luke. You are all like him at least once in our lives.
Stephanie said, trying to cheer me up. But not to his extent, and honestly, I don't see how we can improve his attitude. He just doesn't have what it takes to be a good employee, in my opinion, because if I can't get through to him, then who can? I asked.
Just keep trying.
John encouraged.
You'll find a way.
I still wasn't sure if I could work with Joseph, but it wasn't like I had a choice. I would just have to deal with it. The rest of the day was just as brutal as expected. We both kept disagreeing over the presentation, and we just couldn't seem to get on the same page. At last, the day was over, and I spent most of Monday meditating to let the stress out of my system. My one-day vacation was over, which meant I had to work with Joseph yet again. We only had a few more hours before corporate arrived, so we needed to work fast. Luckily, we were almost done with the whole presentation. There was just a few details left, and the whole thing needed to look well put together. Joseph then suggested that one of us should present the first half, and the other should present the second, instead of having us both present at the same time. This was not a good idea because I knew very well that Joseph would screw up at some point during the other part of the presentation, specifically when being asked questions. We compromised and I agreed to do the first half while he would do the later part. Only a few minutes left before it was time for the presentation. Mrs. Dickerson had a few words to say to us.
Listen, you two. These gentlemen here want this presentation to be as good as it can possibly be, so don't disappoint them. Also, you must answer every question they ask you. Otherwise, you'll make our company look bad.
She said. The words were scary as hell, but we understood.
So, who will present first?
She asked. I'll present first, I said.
Good luck.
Joseph said, sarcastically doubting my ability to give a good presentation. Little did he know, I was an expert at giving presentations back in high school. Watch and learn, I said to him. I took a deep breath and the audience watched as I walked up to the blackboard. Good morning, gentlemen. I'm proud to welcome you all here today. I'm going to present to you the first half of our presentation, and then we'll open up the floor to feedback and questions. First, we'll discuss the basics of customer service and how we can provide good customer service, I said proudly. For the sake of not boring you all, I won't go into too many details. Let's just say it involved a lot of diagrams and definitions, and it made for a very long presentation, especially for the first half. It was also arguably one of the most in-depth presentations I have ever made. Apparently, Joseph seemed to agree because his jaw dropped harder than a rookie quarterback on his first day of practice.
How is he doing this?
He asked incredulously. He was stunned by the fact I was able to present the whole thing so well without feeling nervous or afraid. I answered every single question they asked, even the weird ones, without skipping a beat and without getting lost. When I finished, they applauded and even complimented me on a great presentation, and even said that I would make a good businessman if I wanted to go into that field. Joseph didn't clap when they were done applauding. He didn't say anything at all. He was dumbfounded, slack-jawed and speechless. There was no way he could present his part nowhere near as good as I did. He could have asked me for help beforehand and I would have gladly given it to him. Instead, he was all cocky and thought he could pull it off and it backfired in his face. I wasn't even showing off or anything. I was just being myself and the audience loved it. It was great.
Like, how did you pull that off?
He asked. Well, let's just say I'm a bit of an expert at giving presentations, I said.
Hell, am I even supposed to present like you when I don't have your skills and experience?
He asked. I mean, you could have easily asked me for help beforehand, but you chose to yell profanities at me and you specifically said you wanted to present your own part. Now go out there and give your part. You're all. I believe in you, I said. Joseph realized his mistake, but it was too late for me to make some last-minute changes to his presentation. He had to present with what he had. He was nervous as hell, I could tell. I could also tell that he did not make his part as professional as I did. He could not answer any questions properly because he genuinely did not know what the hell he was talking about, and he definitely had some fear and uncertainty about his presentation. He looked like he was about to have a panic attack, like some kind of drama queen, so I stepped in, realizing that he was about to die of embarrassment. I had to manually fix every single thing he messed up, from too many spelling mistakes to some questions that were not properly answered. I fixed every single thing. The audience was not happy at how unprofessional Joseph's presentation was, but I made sure to tell them that Joseph was still young and that he had potential, but still needs to learn how to better himself. In the end, they were happy with the presentation. They gave me an A+ for my part, and they gave Joseph a B-, which to them stood for barely passing. Of course, Mrs. Dickerson was disappointed in Joseph for not only embarrassing himself and almost the entire company, but also for the things he said to me and not accepting any of my advice.
Mr. Rogers, your behavior both today and Sunday was completely unacceptable. I'm sorry, but I cannot allow you to continue working here if you continue to act this way. It's not what I hired you for,
she said. I overheard their conversation, and while I admit Joseph was acting immature and probably deserved some punishment for his actions, firing him after his first strike was a bit much. I knew I had to say something. Oh, there's no need for that, Mrs. Dickerson. Joseph here may have been a bit immature and rude, but I don't think he should be let go after the first offense. He's still young, and in my opinion, I can see a lot of potential in him. He just needs more time to mature and develop as a person and a professional. I'm more than willing to teach him the ropes, and I'm sure he'll do just fine once he learns his lesson, I said. Joseph couldn't believe it. He was shocked that I was defending him even after he said those things to me. Mrs. Dickerson thought for a moment before turning to Joseph and saying,
You have a lot to learn, you men. Listen to Luke and follow his advice. Don't screw up again, or else I'll send you to the unemployment line.
Yes, Mrs. Dickerson.
Joseph said meekly. Mrs. Dickerson walked away, and then Joseph turned to me.
Like, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to get me out of trouble like that. I embarrassed the hell out of myself, and I'm really pissed at myself for not listening to you.
He said, well, it was the right thing to do. We've all made mistakes. You just have to learn from them and move on, I said.
I promise I'll listen to you, but I'll take your advice from now on. And also, I'm sorry for being so rude at you.
He said, you don't worry about that. I've heard worse. Just don't swear at the wrong people in the future, I said.
I'll do anything to make up for this.
He said, anything, I asked.
Anything.
He said. I smiled. If that's the case, I want you to come down to my apartment tonight. We'll have a steak dinner, one you won't soon forget, I said.
Wait, really? A steak dinner?
Joseph asked, amused. Yep, I said.
All right, I'm down. See you at your place at 6.
He said. Joseph was in for a surprise. At 6, he was already at my apartment, sitting at the dinner table with an empty plate in front of him. I entered the room with a can of peas in one hand and a spoon in the other. Joseph looked at the can of peas and was worried.
I'm not eating that.
He said. You told me you would do anything to make up for what you did, I said.
Anything but making me peas. Well, can do this.
He said. You are not getting any steak until you eat that can of peas, I said. Joseph gave in and started to eat the peas out of the can.
These are horrible. You could have given me any other food. What peas of all things?
He asked. Oh, because they were good for you, okay? Don't tell me you're about to throw up. I just cleaned the place, and I'm not cleaning up after you, I said. He had enough peas before. I decided he shouldn't have to continue eating them. I did not want to clean up his vomit. Joseph, you look ridiculous. Here, have your steak. Heck, while we're at it, let's watch something on the TV. Are you into baseball? I asked.
Of course, I'm a Dodgers fan.
He said. Well, if that's the case, let's watch the Dodgers humiliate the Mets, I said. Over the next few hours, we watched the Dodgers destroy the Mets again, and it was so satisfying watching the Mets get their butts kicked. Joseph and I became best friends after that, and he promised to learn from his mistakes and to be more polite, efficient, professional, and mature.